Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And today we're continuing our brief investigation into the career of Michael Caine with The Italian Job, which you were saying you've seen a load of times, you didn't want to see it again, what's the point? Are you now grateful that I dragged you to the Electric to see The Italian Job on the big screen?
I had a good time seeing it. I was also very fascinated by the audience. Yeah, it was all a middle-aged, middle-class audience. And there was a lot of people at the Electric, on a Thursday night at 6. Yeah, so all of that interested me. I had a good time. I think my mixed feelings about the film remain the same. Yeah, kind of there are moments that I enjoy very, very much. I can see why it's pleasurable. Ideologically, it's quite suspect in all kinds of ways. All the British rah-rah business can get to one who isn't British. But it's a film I like very much.
I thought it was a cracking way to spend an evening. I mean, I had a really good time. So I basically I feel like I've seen every bit of The Italian Job in my life, although it turns out that's really not true. Everything really before the heist takes place, I'd only seen little bits of. But it's a film that's constantly been on TV through my childhood. I've always picked up little bits and pieces. I'm very familiar with the car chase in particular, the actual heist. But this was my first time seeing it through, and seeing it on a nice big screen with an appreciative audience was fabulous. I thought it was dead charming. It really made me... It's complicated. You've already got at some of what's complicated about it, but as an English person, and I say English because it made me feel English. It didn't make me feel British, despite the fact it's not particularly... Like, it's covered in Union Jacks and stuff. It's a British film, but it made me feel very English in a kind of complicated way, because... It's a really Eurosceptic kind of film. It's a film that basically goes over to Italy, our enemy in the war, kind of 25 years prior to this, and says, up yours, we're better, we're going to drive on top of your buildings, on your test tracks with our minis. It's full of British iconography, motoring iconography especially. Minis, Jags, Astons, Land Rover, kind of beating Fiat out, which is... And it's set up as... the heist, that is set up as a deal with Fiat. The Italians and the Chinese, and we're going to get in the middle of it and steal their gold, essentially. And so you kind of recognise all this. It really reminded me of what you said when we talked about Doctor Strange 2, when we were talking about that Captain Britain thing, and I was saying what a tacky thing it is to see the British flag on things these days. Because you said you always thought of it as very cool, right? And this is the era you were talking about, 1969. Cool Britannia,
Swinging London.
Yeah, Swinging London,
Streets,
Austin Powers kind of era. And you were saying, like, you should think of it in the same way that you think of the American flag. American iconography there's nothing complicated about American iconography. It's in your face, and it only really means one thing. Whereas what the British do with their iconography, with our iconography, is we put irony into it. So it kind of softens that pill, we were sort of saying. It made you feel like you were talking about the parachute in James Bond that's a British flag. It's like, it's funny and it's witty, even though you should think of it as this imperialist thing. It kind of gets under your skin a little bit.
It's more than that as well, because I think the film is flag waving, but it undercuts it also.
Yeah.
Right. So the guy who says these bloody foreigners, he's one of these big fat slobs. Yeah.
Arrogant Englishmen abroad.
All of these, the most patriotic people are the biggest crooks. So it's like so the film is both waving the flag and kind of, both simultaneously poking fun at it and also building a kind of cohesion, because one of the things it's saying is that this kind of British rah-rahness, which is represented by both Noel Coward, the epitome of the establishment then, but also, all of these crooks, and of various classes, right? The car drivers are all middle class, and and so on. But it's constantly being poked fun at, so I think it's a very interesting kind of use of it, really, because there's no question that there is the flag waving Johnny Foreigner. It's done during an Italian match, and there's more than that. There's the Benny Hill stuff, which I thought was interesting because I laughed at every joke, you know, and each joke is like sexist, fattest,
Yeah.
everything, right? You know, and there was something about like
because the joke isn't quite on him. That's the thing about it, is it's partially on him. The joke is that, isn't it funny that this guy is into big women? But then the joke ultimately then says, well, he shouldn't be into big women. You know? Like, that's do you know what I mean? Like, it makes the joke on him for being into something that we value as, you know, wrong to be into.
Yeah, he's shown as being both a genius and simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, and part of his simpleness is that he's into fat women.
Yeah.
So, which of those elements are of their era? Which is the film being very clever with? Would it work the same on me if it was gay jokes or something? Yeah, would I be so forgiving, or, you know, so ignore the underside of it? You know, if it was kind of more pointed at me, I don't know.
There is a character who's gay, or at least coded as gay, Camp Tony, whatever. Camp what, sorry?
Campetti.
Campetti, right.
Yeah, who's wonderful.
Yeah.
Right, so, and I think this is the thing about the film. Yeah, it's part of its inclusiveness. Yeah, that it includes all types of men, all classes, you know, and actually, you know, there's not a single redeemable woman in it, right? They're all fleeing his bedroom like, you know, dolly birds, or coming on to him, or in love with him, or they're just the fat birds that, you know, sad, you know, simple Benny Hill is into, right? Yeah.
Yeah. There's also a very unredeemable racist joke in it when he's going around the table introducing everyone, and he introduces the one black guy, and his name's Big something.
Oh yeah, and you know why.
And he's big for obvious reasons, and that's just plain racist. There's nothing charming about that.
Yeah.
You know, like there is something still charming about the Benny Hill stuff.
So you don't think he was referring to his height?
I don't think so. You know, I mean, he is a big bloke, but I don't think that's what it was referring to.
So those are the main reservations, which are interesting because actually I suspect those reservations of mine are probably the reason why a certain part of the population in England love the film as much as they do. Yeah, because of that rah-rahness, and, you know, because of the sexist, you know, jokes, and, you know, and what goes along with it. Yeah, because I think also, like, I mean, the cars and so on, it need not be a part of it, but it kind of goes along with that kind of blokishness,
yeah? Yeah, laddishness.
Yeah. Leads, like Michael Caine says, leads. Come on, leads.
Yeah, you can see what kind of... You can see the things that become in the 90s kind of quite toxic in lad culture.
Yes.
And I suppose you could see them as toxic here, but maybe it's because they're just so much more dominant as part of the culture.
Yes, I think the film also has a very playful tone.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not meant to be taken seriously, and that kind of takes it quite a long way. I mean, I think the whole beginning with the Noel Coward stuff is genius, really, you know. I mean, him kind of leaving prison, insulting Noel Coward, you know. I think Noel Coward is such an incredible performer. I mean, I'm not sure he's a good actor, you know, but he was a leading star in the West End for 70 years at the time he did this, I think.
Do you think
he became a star in 1919 or something? No, it's just the way that somebody who's not necessarily a great actor, because, you know, for me, a great actor is someone who conveys and makes you feel a great depth and range of emotion, often contradictory or simultaneous. Yeah, kind of, you know, by that criteria, Noel Coward is not a great actor, but he's a great star, and he's a great performer in the sense that everything he does has an effect and achieves the effect. Right, the wave of the hand. Yeah. Right, the way that he pronounces something and gets a laugh out of it. Right, those are, you know, about achieving effects, and he's great.
There's a broadness and a certain caricature to his
theatricality.
Character. I mean, well, and certainly when he gets into his room and it's plastered with pictures of the Queen, and you know.
Though that could be more a directorial joke, a joke made by the filmmakers.
Yeah, but I think it relies on Noel Coward, like
of course, and what he meant and means. So I thought, and actually I misremembered because, you know, he occupies that whole first third of the film. He has a much bigger role than I remembered. Yeah. Right? I mean, I basically remember the toilet scene and not much else. Right? You know, whereas there's a lot more than that. There's the funeral scene, and the looking at the film, and all of those things. So I didn't remember that. The other thing that I didn't remember is that the film also stars two great Italian stars. Yeah, Rossano Brazzi. Yeah, who for a brief moment was also a star in the U.S. He was the star of South Pacific, right? And the Katharine Hepburn film Summertime, I think, right, set in Venice, and a lot of other Hollywood films of the 1950s, and of course Ralph Vallone, who was a great star of European cinema of the post-war period. He's the mafia guy. And Rossano Brazzi is the guy who gets killed at the very beginning, who shows up in the film explaining the heist. So I'd completely forgotten, that they were in it.
The other thing about Noel Coward in the film is it's through his character that the heist is kind of contextualized as an international thing. So, like I said, it's Italy and China having this business relationship that I think we see on a paper is worth $140 million.
Yes.
And we're getting in the middle of it and taking this $4 million. But it's all about British money, British balance of payments. It's really politically contextualized, economically contextualized in the context of the country, and it's done through the presence of Noel Coward's character. It's his presence as this figure of the establishment, as we've said, his relationship to I think he wasn't knighted at the time, but he was certainly seen as...
He was the establishment because he'd had hit after hit after hit after hit in the West End. Yeah, since the late teens, He was the Queen Mother's favourite composer, and a Noel Coward play was like the West End play that you put on top hat and tails to go see.
My point is that through him, it's important that it's through him that this is a heist that kind of we can all be proud of. These are criminals who we're on their side. It's
a patriotic heist.
Exactly, and it's for the good of the country. And the other kind of side of class is the working class in this, and that's Michael Caine, who that's kind of centred around his regional accent in particular. You notice the decorations on his wall. He had like Private Eye magazine, which actually is kind of fairly middle to upper class, but it has this anti-establishment bent to it. It's all about poking fun.
Yes.
And the song Self-Preservation Society, which is kind of it's like a take on all of those sorts of songs. I think it was original for the film, but it's a take on those kind of working class.
The film is interesting, and it's of the fashion of the period because it is highlighting the working class Cockney element as leader of the thing under Noel Coward. Which you have to remember. But on the other hand, everyone else is under him, and that includes a university professor. And it includes all those upper class race car drivers, right? Because I think the race car drivers are coded as upper class, right? So that's an interesting thing. But the film is also kind of hierarchical. So there's the Queen, and there's Noel Coward. And then, there's the Cockney, kind of running the rest of the show. But...
And despite the fact they're hierarchy, they're all basically on the same team. Like we're all doing this for our country and our Queen and our economy.
Yes.
So it's not the working class versus the middle class versus the upper class. They're just operating together on different levels.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is part of the appeal of the thing, I'm sure. Because it brings together a kind of unity. I'm sure it would have a particular resonance now. I mean, those shots when Noel Coward enters his cells and you see all the pictures of the Queen, you think, this is a Jubilee moment.
God, the Jubilee, I forgot about that.
Have you ever seen the cover? Because Noel Coward was a huge success in Vegas in the 50s.
Right.
And he was such a success that they did a recording of his act. And a very, very famous photograph of him in the desert, wearing a tux, and sipping a cup of tea. So that's, the Britishness that he signified,
Noel of Arabia.
Well, Noel and Vegas being British.
But Lawrence of Arabia went there and, became part of it and took on the outfit and so on. And Noel went there and said, no, I'm wearing a tux.
Yes. Well, he was one of those empire people,
Yeah.
you know, that believed that he had a right to be at home anywhere in the world.
Yeah, well, that's certainly the impression I got as well with that fat English bloke that we mentioned, where he comes over to Italy, asks for directions, and then is immediately pissed off with the answer and says, bloody foreigners. You know what I mean? It's like, wherever you go, it's supposed to be my country, and these bloody foreigners are getting in the way, sort of thing. I was thinking, is it a great car chase? When it was, because I had a big smile on my face whenever the minis were on screen.
Yes.
And this is part of, like I said, what I was kind of feeling complicated about, like, you know, I know that all this iconography has some toxic elements to it, but at the same time, I love to see this chase. It's always been.
Well,
there
I love
through my
seeing the
childhood.
film. I mean, you know, we're talking about a complicated relationship here because I don't think it's a great film.
No.
I don't think it's a great chase scene.
No.
You know. But it's really enjoyable all the way through. And actually, why it's enjoyable is maybe something worth, you know, kind of discussing. But first, let's return to the car chase.
Yeah, well, because it's segmented, right? This is why, like, if you think about the great car chases in cinema, they have these through lines. You follow it the whole way. And the thing about this chase is you essentially... Like, it makes no sense that these cars would be escaping this way, you know, hitting up every location in Italy just to drive on the roofs and through the sewers and stuff. It doesn't make any sense, right? But they're doing it because they've gone, oh, we can drive through the sewers here. What a brilliant little scene that will be. We can drive on the roof here. What a brilliant little scene that will be, right? So it's kind of, it's cartoony and it's nonsensical, but it's absolutely joyous to see. I mean, that shot where they drive up on the roof. I forget the name of the building. It's not the Fiat factory. It's where they go and hide in the corners.
I know.
Like, you see that shot of the guy who follows them, looking around like, where could they be? And it's like, well, they're just on the roof. They're with you. You know, how could you not see them? But it
also it's a stupid, pointless.
Yeah, completely.
Thing.
I mean,
You know,
there's
what the fuck are they doing in the roof? There's no way out.
Yeah. And the bit where they go through the sewers, the story is that they wanted to have one of the cars do a complete loop of the sewer, and they kept trying getting it, went on its roof. But that's what it is, right? We're driving down steps, doing this, that, and the other. It's all great fun, and part of it is this thing of kind of refighting the war. You know, Italy was an enemy. They were part of the Axis with Germany, and it's about kind of going over to Italy and proving that our cars are better than theirs, and we can go over there and give them one in the eye.
But I think the whole thing with Europe is more complicated than that. So on the one hand, you have that. On the other hand, you know, why are you even in Italy in the first place? And why do you go through Switzerland and show this fantastic, gorgeous landscape and places and people eating and, you know, the pasta and the chicken that they steal? And so there is like this assertion of superiority, and at the same time, this kind of like, a longing for the continent, I feel, that the film expresses in another way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's exciting to be globetrotting like those James Bond movies
exactly.
always were, right? It's lovely, fantastic to see stuff. And then maybe there's a couple of shots early on of architecture in London, which is horrible 60s architecture, rebuilding after the war and all this fucking disgusting stuff. And then you go over to Italy, and where are they staying? In a beautiful mansion, you know, with the fucking Sistine Chapel on the ceiling, basically. Even though when you get into the centre of town in Turin, you know, it's still actually just as horrible as London, really. But that's not what we're focusing on. You know, we're focusing on the beauty of the place, you know, where we find it, and the beauty of those alpine roads.
Yes, and the mountains with the snow, and my God, you know.
Yeah.
I think there's more to be said on that, or there's more of an ambivalence than just like, you know, we're better than Johnny Foreigner, or we're reliving the war and winning, and, you know, because I mean, I think this is just before the UK joined the common market, right, in 73 or something. Yeah. So there's this dual thing where, yes, you know, we're better than you are, but on the other hand, you're kind of gorgeous as well. Yeah, like,
it's that thing of like the English like to see themselves as travellers. We travel the world. That's what we do. We go everywhere as if it's ours. You know, as if we have the right to, you know, this, that, and the other, and makes us special. And I think that's kind of what that feels like. That globetrotting stuff feels like that. You know, the world is our plaything.
Yes, I mean, it definitely has that. I'm not denying that.
I also want to think about it briefly in relation to Get Carter, which we saw the other day, because it really put into perspective the difference in the characters that Kane plays, the difference in his persona, his star persona. Like this really puts in perspective the darkness, because here it's pure caper, pure cartoon.
Yeah.
Everything's made a joke of.
Yes. And he's wonderful at doing the comedy, Kane.
Yeah.
You see, I mean, I think he really is a great actor. Yeah, kind of...
Even though you said the other day, don't like him.
But that's different.
Okay.
I mean, I always distinguish between, whether I like something or not and whether it's good.
Well, explain yourself.
Well, to me, like, he is, or he has been, a star since Zulu, since 62, my whole life. 62, 64, I forget when Zulu was, something like that.
Is it 66 Zulu?
No, I think it's earlier.
Okay.
But look it up.
I'm going to... No, 64... Ipcris File 65, Alfie 66.
Okay, so, he's been a star since 64. And, it's always, like, befuddled me a little bit why he's a star, right? Because, well, he's not someone that I would particularly pay to go see. I mean, he's often been in films that I like very much. Yeah, kind of Hannah and Her Sisters or whatever. But he's never been the main draw or the main point of appeal or what I like best about any of those films, actually. Though it's interesting watching these British films, kind of, because actually I think he does come across as a star in these films in a way that it hadn't really occurred to me before. So, I don't think he's he's sexy, or to me he's not sexy, right? He didn't have a defined star persona in America, right, in North America, which I grew up in Canada, right? Obviously, from the perspective of Britain, people imitate him because he's so easily imitable. But that's, working class and accent, is really the way of speaking that kind of is the most imitable thing about him. That in itself doesn't constitute a persona, Though, of course, I think if you look at this period, yes, Alfie, the womanizing, Cockney, so on, that does constitute a persona.
It's all about his smile in this film. He's smiling all the time. There's quite a few close-ups where it's that cheeky grin and he's getting away with stuff and he's
very appealing.
Yeah.
He's very appealing because also he does have an everyman quality because, there's something... And so the other day I was commenting on his height. He's extraordinarily tall, right? But then this film is full of shots of him being awkward, right? So, the way that his shoulders curve, the way that like a tall man tries to make himself shorter. Yeah. So the awkward, he's wearing, what are those basketball shoes? Running shoes.
Like trainers, sneakers.
Yeah, he's wearing sneakers, but that basketball type sneaker that you lace up quite high.
I can't think of it.
They were very trendy. Anyway, it's the kind of thing kids wear, It's like, and he has a very awkward walk, right, from behind, So I think kind of, the film is full of like a kind of unease, in his body, in his walk and so on. That kind of contrasts very interestingly with like the sharp suits, that he wears. So anyway, I find him very endearing and very funny and very good.
Its physicality occurred to me because I thought the same in Get Carter for how big he is and how the film shows it off, and it doesn't come across here, his physical size. He doesn't command scenes in that way. Although he does draw your eye every time, that's part of it.
That's true.
But I pointed out to you early on how so many shots, especially early on, are from waist height or below and looking up, and it's that power, that hero kind of shot. And they're all shots of him, walking into rooms where all the women are and all that kind of stuff, and it's all about looking up to him.
I thought that was more about looking up to them. Up,
Well, in that particular shot, I think it was,
yes.
and the wide frame, captured every single one of them beautifully. But it's in every shot that he's in, lots of them. They're all looking from below, looking up, and it's that powerful sort of. Except it doesn't convey physical power in him. Like it could be like a Superman shot. If you look at the shots in like Mad Men, they're all like that, and Don Draper looks like a fucking superhero. It doesn't do that to Kane here, but nonetheless, we're always positioned below him, looking up, like he's our guy. But it was interesting. I thought it was interesting that they're doing that, and yet physical command is not something that I get out of him in this. Despite the fact that a kind of charismatic command, you definitely do. I forgot how good the ending was. I mean, the ending is it's iconic in British cinema. It's something that's been parodied, imitated. I think the line, hang on lads, I got a great idea, is like, it's always voted as one of the greatest lines in British movies. And I forgot how tense it was. Like, the thing is, I remember reading an article a few years ago that was like, some people had done a study saying, could they have got out of this and how could they have survived it? It's the kind of thing, like, we want to litigate this scene and think about it 40, 50 years afterwards. And the moment that, the bus goes over the edge and they're all stuck there, I'm thinking, no, it's going to be very easy to get this gold back. And then it slides away and going, I forgot that it did that. I forgot the gold slides away. And then I felt the pit in my stomach. And the shot looking from the front of the bus out the back, looking over the Alps, and the bus is swinging. Proper, like Vertigo, Not like the film Vertigo. I mean, it gives you that feeling, that butterflies in the stomach thing. Actually, this is more tense than I remember. Really worked for me.
So why, is it not a great film? My problem is the car chase, though it's thrilling and funny and very memorable in some ways, also it's not great. Yeah, there are things that really could have been cut off. They could have been thought better. Could have been made even more thrilling. So I also thought that...
Yeah, that's true. That is what it comes down to. I remember the bit in Get Carter, which we didn't speak about, where he's being driven off by the girl. And that car just a drive, is all about sex. He's looking at her driving and her legs and the way she... that's great filmmaking. It's really expressive. And here, there's nothing that has that kind of poetry or double meaning or,
No. Also, I thought visually that it wasn't expressive enough. So, so obviously the camera was always in the right place and you saw the car chase and you saw the people, but you didn't feel that it was expressing anything more than that. You didn't feel there was any poetry or any other meaning in a composition or a color or, kind of what great filmmakers add to the basics of just showing you the action, right?
Yeah.
I didn't get any of that from this film.
I think the only thing I felt was great in that respect was the opening, actually, where your man's driving the Lamborghini Miura in the Alps, and it's just the opening credits, and the song's going. I can't remember the name of the song, Matt Monro.
Yes.
That is seductive, expressive filmmaking, and that's the kind of filmmaking that makes you go, "Oh, I want this car." I want to
where
be
the mafia
here.
appear all in an order, right, like an apparition.
Yeah.
Yes, I that it had moments like that, but it wasn't consistent throughout.
No. Which I think maybe actually goes to what I was saying about those shots from below, that are these you think would be these powerful hero shots, but don't have that. They're doing it, but they don't convey it.
I also thought that even within the conventions of the time, for example, I thought the Benny Hill and the girls, you can say, oh well, it's the time or whatever. But actually, the conceptualization of the girlfriend, I thought was just completely cringy. Right? Like, bye, when she's saying bye at the airport, it's like there wasn't a consistency of tone. You think this is a stupid woman, it's like... I really didn't like any of that.
Yeah. See, I like the joke of that bit, because he's cringing away, just going, get on the bloody plane, but he's having to put up with this girlfriend who, bye, I love you. The joke I liked, but you're right, it's not consistent with her character, who is smarter than this.
Yes, I mean, she's someone who was able to, steal a car, pick him up in jail, and smooth over the Pakistani ambassador and whoever else. I mean, I kind of... Anyway, that really made me cringe. So it's for all of those reasons that I think it's still hugely enjoyable, and I can see why I understand why people enjoy it and why it's culty, right? But it doesn't rank up there, in a way that for me Get Carter does.
Yeah. But like I say, a great way to spend an afternoon. It was completely absorbing.
Yes.
Hugely enjoyable, fun. Full of laughs, proper good jokes. And
Noel Coward.
And,
There was something about the inclusivity of the homosexual character.
Yeah.
That I thought was nice. Yeah.
Well, yeah, this is kind of why I brought him up, because it wasn't a joke. There wasn't a joke about him being camp or gay or. I mean, there's one point when they're in the that Sistine Chapel building, and they've all got their gloves on, and he doesn't, and he's doing his nails. I think he's filing his nails. Like, that's the one time where that is even slightly made a joke of.
Well, no, I mean, I think even that to me wasn't really a joke. It's kind of part of who he was. The same as he wears a pink suit. Right, but the other characters don't make fun of him.
Yeah.
Or don't mistreat him or don't condescend to him.
That's what I'm saying. Like, that's the closest the film gets to doing a joke about that.
And that I quite liked, and I find surprising for the period. Right?
Yeah.
It was just 2 years after the law was changed. Anyway, final thoughts?
Good fun. Made me feel all sorts of weird things about my identity. You know what I mean? Who I am and where I come from and my relationship to my country and the continent that I apparently am no longer a part of, and all this stuff. And maybe that is the mark of a great film, that it makes me feel complicated. But it's not a great film. It's just a fun one.
Yes, I thought it was much more fun than I remembered. I didn't obviously experience. I'm not British, so I didn't experience any of those complicated things about identity than you did. But I think part of the reason why the film remains a cult in the UK is because it is kind of interpolating that sense of identity that gives rise to those complicated contradictions that you experienced.
Yeah.
So on that note, thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.